There was a knock on the hospital door. Not loud, not urgent, just patient, like the person on the other side had all the time in the world. Inside, she was still groggy from the epidural, clutching the tiny baby against her chest with a kind of warmth I hadn't seen in years. Her hair was messy, her face pale and puffy, but she was glowing in a way that made me want to scream. She didn't see me look away. "Can you get that?" she said softly, I still locked on the child. I walked to the door like I was underwater. Everything around me, the heart monitor, the faint crying from another room, the faint beeping of machines, felt like background noise to the storm forming in my chest. I opened the door. It was Nurse Joy. The name tag felt like a cruel joke. She smiled kindly and said, "Are we ready to fill out the birth certificate?" My wife, no, Cora, nodded eagerly. "Yes." Finally. She turned to me and added, "Babe, give her your ID." I didn't move. She blinked. "Daryl." The nurse looked between us awkwardly. I stepped into the hallway. "Give us a minute," I said, voice barely above a whisper. The nurse nodded and wheeled the little cart away. I closed the door and turned around. And then, for the first time in all of this, after the tests, the silence, the weeks of me pretending not to notice the second toothbrush in her gym bag, I said it. "I'm not putting my name on that." She froze. "What?" she asked, half laughing, like I just made a cruel joke. I walked over to the window and pulled something from my pocket. A folded envelope. Slightly wrinkled. Slightly torn. She recognized it instantly. "Why do you have that?" "I opened it yesterday," I said quietly. "I wasn't supposed to. It was addressed to you. From the lab." Her mouth opened, but I cut her off. "You didn't even bother using a fake name, Cora. You tested the baby's DNA against mine before he was even born." She started saying something, a denial, maybe, or one of her go-to manipulations, but I didn't care anymore. "I already knew," I said. "Before you even showed me that test, I knew. I've known since January. You think I didn't notice your cycle was off? The way you started locking your phone? You think I didn't recognize his cologne on your scarf?" The silence between us was volcanic. "You were going to lie," I said. "Weren't you? You were going to let me raise him. Pretend. Smile. Host birthdays. Pay tuition. Be the fool." Her lip trembled. "I was going to tell you. I didn't know how." I looked at her for a long moment. "You should have figured it out before you named him after your boss." She gasped. Her hands clutched the baby closer. "That's not fair." "I already talked to Miles," I said calmly. "He didn't deny it. Didn't even blink." She started crying. And I just stood there. I wanted to cry too. I really did. But something inside me had dried up weeks ago. I stepped closer to the hospital bed and looked at the child, innocent, pink, and sleeping. "I have no anger toward him," I whispered. "None. He didn't choose this. You did." She shook her head, mascara streaking down her cheeks. "Please, don't do this now." "I'm not staying," I said. "But before I go, you should know something." I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out one more envelope. This one was addressed to me. "I've known for 6 months that I can't have children. I have the paperwork. From 2 different doctors." Her eyes widened. Her mouth opened. I placed the envelope on the side table beside her and turned toward the door. "You thought you were the one keeping secrets," I said. But the truth was always just one quiet sentence away. Then I walked out, leaving behind the storm she started and the silence that would follow me home. I wish I could say that walking out of that hospital room felt like freedom, that it gave me closure, that the weight I'd been carrying for months suddenly lifted off my chest as soon as the door shut behind me. But no, what I felt was nothing. A kind of numbness that didn't burn, didn't ache, just sat in my ribs like wet cement. I remember passing the nurse's station and catching my reflection in one of the windows. I looked pale, disconnected, like a man who just learned he'd been an extra in his own life. By the time I reached the parking garage, the rain had picked up. Heavy, cold drops that slapped the pavement like they had a point to prove. I stood by my car, engine off, hands shaking over the steering wheel. For 20 minutes. Maybe more. I don't remember. I didn't drive home. Instead, I drove to the last place I thought I'd ever go again, my brother Alan's trailer. He lived about 30 minutes out, in a forgotten stretch of countryside where the cell signal dies and the sky feels too big. We hadn't spoken properly in over a year. Not since Cora told me he made her uncomfortable, always too friendly, too curious about our marriage. Turns out, she was right, just not in the way she claimed. When I pulled up, his porch light was on, and his old hound barked like she recognized me. I walked to the door, every step filled with hesitation. I didn't know exactly what I was going to say. All I had was instinct. That, and a sick feeling that had started brewing ever since I noticed Cora had stopped mentioning his name altogether. He opened the door wearing an old flannel shirt and a fake smile. Daryl? Man, I haven't. Don't, I said. Not tonight. His face dropped. What's going on? I pushed past him. You tell me. Inside, the air smelled like motor oil and microwave dinners. Same as always. He closed the door behind me cautiously. You look like hell, he said. I just came from the hospital, I muttered. Cora had the baby. Alan nodded slowly, but there was something off in his eyes. I saw it. I felt it. I sat down on his torn couch and stared at the blank TV. She told me it's not mine. He didn't answer. She didn't tell me who, I continued, but I'm starting to think, maybe she didn't have to. He took a step back. Come on, Daryl. You visited her in March, I said, when I was out of town for that conference. You brought her groceries. She mentioned it once. I thought it was weird, but I didn't say anything. Then last month, I saw a receipt in her purse from that gas station near your place. Alan exhaled hard. You're grasping at straws, man. I turned to him. Am I? Silence. I can't have kids, I finally said. It's medical. Been confirmed by 2 specialists. His face went pale. Jaw clenched. Fist at his sides. I stood. Walked toward him, slowly. I don't care if you're my brother, I whispered. I'm not leaving without the truth. He looked away. That was all the confirmation I needed. I left without another word. The drive back was worse. The road twisted, my thoughts twisted more. I was trying to hold it together, but somewhere around exit 12, I broke. I pulled over, put my head on the steering wheel, and finally cried. Not just for the betrayal, not just for the lies, but because, at some point, I had let my own life get this far without noticing how far gone it was. I wasn't just mourning a child that wasn't mine. I was mourning the version of me that believed I mattered to anyone in that house. But here's the part Cora and Alan didn't count on. I had already taken precautions. Quiet ones. Careful ones. Over the past month, I'd been moving funds into a separate account, documenting conversations, quietly speaking to an attorney friend from college. Something deep inside me had known this was coming. They may have thought I'd just disappear, but I was about to remind them who I was, even if I had forgotten for a while. This wasn't over. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't even pretend to try. I sat on the floor of my old office, the one Cora had tried to turn into a home yoga space last year, surrounded by empty water bottles, printouts, and legal pads filled with timelines, dates, and receipts. The sound of the fridge humming in the background was the only thing keeping me tethered to reality. I was spiraling, sure, but I was doing it with a plan. See, what most people don't know about me, and what Cora definitely forgot, is that I am methodical to a fault. I don't yell. I don't throw things. I document. When things started feeling off months ago, I began quietly tracking. I took photos of calendars, copied receipts, even recorded a few conversations when I sensed something was coming. I thought maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe it was just my own insecurity screaming into the silence. But now I realized it wasn't paranoia. It was survival instinct. I already had the DNA test results proving I couldn't father a child. But I didn't stop there. I started digging into her phone backups, her location history on shared apps, the digital trail people think vanishes when they clear their screen. Spoiler, it doesn't. And what I found? Hotel bookings under an alias. Messages to a number saved as Mira Yoga that was, in reality, a prepaid burner phone. And worst of all, a voicemail she must have accidentally saved, his voice, Alan's, laughing and calling her mama, telling her he couldn't wait to see their little guy. I sat in that room and felt like I was drowning in molasses. Slow, suffocating, invisible pain. I thought I had felt betrayal when she told me the baby wasn't mine, but this was worse. This was betrayal dressed in my own blood. But I didn't break. Not anymore. I called my lawyer the next morning. Her name is Letitia. We went to undergrad together, and she's the type of person who could win a case even if she argued it in her pajamas. I told her everything. No theatrics. Just the cold truth. The betrayal. The paternity. The brother. She didn't hesitate. We're filing emergency separation with asset protection today. I nodded, though I knew she couldn't see me through the phone. And I want to make sure she doesn't get a cent more than what's fair. No leverage. No emotional manipulation. You got it, she said. And Daryl. I'm sorry. I didn't reply. What was there to say? By the afternoon, I had everything packed from the house. Not everything I owned. No, just everything she didn't touch. My guitars. My grandfather's watch. The photos of my mother before cancer turned her into someone I barely recognized. The rest? I left behind like dead weight. I dropped the keys off with the building manager and left a note on the kitchen counter. Nothing dramatic. Just one line, written in thick black ink. The truth has a funny way of showing up, even when you bury it in a smile. Then I disappeared. I went to stay with an old friend, Marcus, who runs a tiny cabin rental business upstate. No questions, no judgments. Just space. And for a few quiet days, I tried to feel human again. I watched deer cross muddy trails in the morning. I made strong coffee that tasted like burnt freedom. I breathed. But healing isn't linear. And on day 4, I got a text from Cora. Just one sentence. We need to talk. No apology. No explanation. No acknowledgement. I didn't answer. I let it sit. 2 hours later, another message came through. It's not what you think. At that point, I laughed. Not out of humor, but disbelief. Not what I think. I had hard evidence, DNA reports, audio recordings, timelines, digital trails, and she still thought she could gaslight me? I turned my phone off. But she wasn't done. The next morning, there was a voicemail. Her voice was shaky, fake tears woven between words. She said she made a mistake, that she was scared, that she needed someone, and Alan was just there. She said she never meant to hurt me. And then she made the fatal error. She said, "Can we just go back to how it was?" I stared at the screen like it had slapped me. Go back? Back to what? The lies? The pretending? Me raising her brother's child? That's when I knew. It wasn't enough to leave quietly. They had played me like a fool for months, maybe longer, and I let them. I gave them my silence, my patience, my blind loyalty. Now, they were going to see what happened when the man they underestimated stopped playing nice. I didn't want revenge. I wanted truth, loud and permanent, and I had just the plan for how to deliver it. The morning I decided to go public with the truth, it wasn't out of spite. It wasn't because I wanted to destroy her. It was because I'd already been destroyed. The man I used to be, the trusting, soft-spoken, bend-over-backwards husband, was gone. And what stood in his place wasn't angry. It was clear. Coldly, painfully clear. I didn't want revenge. I wanted reality to catch up to the lies they had lived so comfortably in. I wanted the bubble they built to pop loudly and permanently. So I started with the baby announcement. Cora had been planning this huge social media rollout. She'd hinted at it to friends in passing months ago, something about a perfectly curated Instagram post. She wanted balloons, a theme, even a slow-motion video of her accidentally revealing the baby's name while smiling into the camera. I beat her to it. Using an old shared cloud account that she'd forgotten was still connected to her home computer, I pulled down every photo, every planning note, and even the edited caption drafts she'd saved to notes. She had outlined exactly what she was going to say. Surprise. Baby Ellison has arrived, and our hearts are fuller than ever. The name was Alan's middle name, not mine. It felt like a final spit in my face. But that was fine, because when she hit post on her Instagram, she had no idea I had already posted something else an hour earlier and tagged every mutual friend, family member, and coworker I could. My caption? Today, my wife welcomes a child into the world. A child she conceived during a long-term affair with my brother. While I stood beside her, believing we were building a future together, they were building a lie behind my back. I've since learned I am medically incapable of fathering children. She knew. She hid it. She lied. I share this not for pity, but for truth. Some betrayals aren't just emotional, they're surgical. And this one cut through everything I thought was real. I attached the redacted version of the DNA report. No sensitive information. Just the line that read, "Patient is non-viable for reproduction due to congenital bilateral absence of vas deferens." And the date. It went viral. Not millions of likes viral, but enough that people started calling, texting. Screenshots flew faster than I could open them. Friends messaged me in disbelief. Her colleagues, some of whom I barely knew, reached out apologizing for ever believing her. Our marriage was struggling narrative. But the real explosion came 12 hours later. Alan showed up at the cabin. I should have expected it, but the sight of him still made my chest tighten. He looked wild, disheveled hair, red eyes, a shirt that looked like it had been slept in for days. He didn't knock, just banged on the wooden door like a debt collector. I didn't want to open it, but I needed to see his face when he realized I wasn't the same man he manipulated for years. I opened it slowly. No words. Just eye contact. You couldn't just keep this between us, he spat, voice low and bitter. I stepped outside and shut the door behind me. You mean between you, my wife, and your secret baby? Yeah. No. I thought the rest of the world deserved a look too. He shook his head, jaw clenching. You're ruining her life. She ruined her own life, I said. I'm just the narrator now. She's not a bad person, Daryl. I let out a laugh. Not sarcastic. Just sad. She's not a person to me at all anymore. He looked like he wanted to hit me. His fists were balled up, so tight his knuckles turned white. But then his eyes flicked to something behind me, and his whole face dropped. Letitia had stepped out of her car in the driveway. She held a folder under her arm. Perfect timing, I said, not even looking at him anymore. He turned and walked back to his truck without a word. Tires screeched on gravel as he sped off. Letitia handed me the folder. Inside, the finalized separation order, the restraining clause, and the full petition for asset protection. Signed, sealed, airtight. You're in the clear, she said. She doesn't get a dime more than the law allows. And the house. Yours if you want it. But I don't think you do. I don't, I said. I never want to walk through that front door again. We stood in silence for a moment. Have you thought about therapy? She asked gently. Every day, I said honestly. But right now this is mine. Letting the truth breathe. Later that night, Cora called me from an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. Her voice was trembling, almost unrecognizable. She said, "You've humiliated me. Everyone's turning their back on me. I can't even go to the store without people whispering. I made a mistake. A huge one. But this is too far." I listened to the whole thing in silence. And then I deleted it. Because this wasn't about punishing her anymore. This was about rescuing what little was left of me from the wreckage she left behind. And I wasn't done yet. The days that followed weren't peaceful. They weren't even quiet. When you tell the truth loud enough, it doesn't just echo. It reverberates through every corner of the lives built on deception. Cora thought the world would sympathize with her once the dust settled. That once the baby was born, once emotions cooled, people would stop caring. That I would fade into the background like some awkward footnote in her story of finding happiness again. But I wasn't fading. I was documenting, preserving, exposing. Because truth, the real kind, the raw kind, doesn't need to scream. It just needs to be heard. Once, I started receiving emails. Hundreds of them. From strangers. From men who'd been cheated on and told to man up. From women who had been gaslit for years and found power in finally seeing someone speak publicly. I wasn't trying to go viral, but I'd struck something in people, a collective wound that we all just learned to live with. And just as I started finding the smallest pieces of myself in the ashes, Cora made her next move. A letter. Handwritten. Delivered to the cabin in an envelope with no return address, no stamps. Just a folded sheet of expensive stationery that still smelled like her perfume. She must have dropped it off herself. It started with, "Daryl, I need you to understand." She went on for 4 pages about how things between us had been disconnected, how Alan wasn't planned, how I had become distant, uninvolved, and clinical. She blamed the infertility. She blamed my silence. She even wrote, "I never would have done this if I didn't feel so alone in our marriage." I laughed when I read that part. The kind of laugh that punches the air out of your lungs. It was the same logic as a thief telling you it was your fault for leaving the door unlocked. She ended with, "Despite everything, I still want you to be part of his life. You helped build so much of this. You deserve to be there." I didn't respond. Instead, I prepared something else. I uploaded a video. Not to any major platform. Just a quiet corner of the internet. A private link. Unlisted. But I made sure it got to the right people. It was a simple recording, my voice narrating over a black screen, then fading into images. Screenshots of the DNA report. Clips from our shared calendar showing the dates she told me she was traveling for work that aligned with Alan's vacation time. Photos from the PI, blurry, distant, but clear enough to show her and Alan walking into a hotel room 2 towns over. Her hand on his back, his hand on her stomach. Then I spoke the sentence I had practiced 100 times. This isn't a story about a marriage that ended. This is a story about the way silence protects betrayal until it doesn't. I didn't upload it out of rage. I uploaded it because their story had already gone public, and they told it wrong. The fallout was immediate. Her company, where she was already on thin ice after a previous HR complaint, placed her on indefinite leave pending an internal review. The company prided itself on integrity. Public image mattered. Apparently, being the subject of a mid-scale online scandal wasn't great for their brand. Alan lost several of his clients, not because of anything I said, but because the story started writing itself across community Facebook groups, local message boards, and professional networks. You can't be someone's trusted advisor when everyone's seen you as a man who torched his own brother's life. But the part that really stunned me was the message from Alan's fiancée. Yes, fiancé. I hadn't even known he was engaged. She messaged me 2 nights later, just 2 words. Thank you. That's when I learned they were supposed to get married the following fall. That she had always had a gut feeling something was off, that Alan was distant, that he was hiding something. And apparently, after watching the video, she packed up her things, canceled the lease they'd signed together, and left. They thought they were building a secret, but all they were doing was digging a shared grave, and now they had no idea how to climb out of it. But the real gut punch came a week later. I was back in the cabin, flipping through legal documents, when I got a knock at the door. I opened it, and there she stood. Cora. No makeup. Eyes hollow. Holding the baby in a carrier. I didn't move. I didn't speak. She didn't ask to come in. She just said, I don't know what to do anymore. I looked at her. At the child, this innocent being brought into the world by 2 people who had no right to create him in the shadow of such betrayal. And then I stepped outside. I told the truth, Cora, I said calmly. That's all I did. You want me to take that back because it hurts? It's supposed to hurt. Tears welled in her eyes. He needs someone stable. Then give him what you never gave me, I said. Honesty. Consistency. Responsibility. I can't do this alone. Yes, I whispered. You can. Because you made every decision alone. And then I did what I hadn't done for her in years. I closed the door. Not with rage. Not with finality. But with peace. I finally realized that some chapters don't end with exclamation marks or ellipses. Some just close. Quietly. Firmly. And once closed, you never have to reread them again. 3 days after I shut the door on Cora and the child that wasn't mine, I thought I could finally settle into the silence. Not peace. I wasn't naive enough to expect peace, but stillness. For the first time in months, there were no calls, no new emails, no midnight knocks. Just quiet mornings at the cabin, coffee that didn't taste bitter from stress, and moments where I could almost remember who I was before everything exploded. But that illusion didn't last. It shattered the moment I checked my mail. At the bottom of a small pile of envelopes and a local paper, there was a large manila envelope addressed to me. No return address. No stamps. Just my name written in slanted blue ink. Inside, I found photographs. Not digital. Not printed at Walgreens. These were developed, grainy, and old school, like someone had taken their time in a dark room to prepare them just for me. I flipped through the first few quickly, then froze. There was Cora. And Alan. But not recently. These were from years ago. Before the affair came to light. Before the hospital. Before I ever had suspicions. One photo was of them at a barbecue I had hosted. My own backyard. I was in the background, flipping burgers on the grill. They were in the foreground, sitting close, too close. Alan had his hand resting on her knee. Cora was leaning in, smiling. The next photo was even worse. It was from our anniversary trip to Asheville, 3 years ago. I remember that trip. Cora had insisted we go. Insisted she planned everything. Said she wanted to reignite things. But there, in the photo, was Alan walking out of the same lodge we stayed in. Same building. Same weekend. I felt sick. I went cold. Not from anger, that emotion had long since burned out, but from sheer disbelief at the depth of it. This wasn't a mistake or a moment of weakness. This was something they had carefully, deliberately maintained for years under my nose. The baby hadn't been the betrayal. He was just the evidence. I turned over the last photograph. On the back, in the same blue ink, were the words. You only know half the story. She's lied longer than you think. And not just to you. No name. No number. No clue who sent it. I called Letitia immediately and sent her scans of the photos. These weren't from the PI you hired, she said, voice tense. That much I can confirm. Then who? I don't know. But whoever it is, they want you to see something you missed. I didn't sleep that night. My mind kept circling that last line. Not just to you. What did that mean? Who else was she lying to? What else had been hidden from me all these years? The next day, I got my answer. It came in the form of a phone call from an unknown number. I normally let those go to voicemail now, but something, maybe instinct, maybe dread, made me pick up. The voice on the other end was male. Nervous. Shaky. Maybe mid-40s. He didn't introduce himself. He just said, "You don't know me, but I used to be married to her." I sat down. "You were married to Cora. Before you. Years ago. Short marriage. Ended fast. She told everyone I cheated. That I was unstable. But I wasn't. He took a deep breath. I found out about Alan. Back then. She swore it was nothing. Said I was imagining things. I left before it got worse. My heart sank. She'd done this before. The pattern wasn't new. I wasn't some rare accident of betrayal. I was just the next in line." The man continued, "I saw your post. The one about the baby. It shook me. I didn't want to interfere, but I found something." He explained that during their short marriage, Cora had kept a locked box, an actual physical lockbox she kept under their bed. He hadn't thought much of it at the time. But when he moved out, he took it with him, thinking she'd eventually want it back. She never asked for it, he said. Never mentioned it again. And I forgot about it, until your video. That made me go looking. What was inside? I asked. Letters. Dozens of them. Some to Alan. Some from Alan. And one to someone named Rose. That name meant nothing to me. I asked who Rose was, and he hesitated. I don't know. But the tone of the letter, it was apologetic. Like she'd done something unforgivable. Something she said, Daryl can never know. He offered to mail the lockbox. I gave him the address to Letitia's office. By the following afternoon, it arrived. We had to break it open, and what was inside changed everything I thought I knew. There were love letters, yes. But not just between Cora and Alan. There was a stack of letters dated years earlier, letters to a woman named Rose who, based on context, was Cora's sister. A sister I never knew existed. The final letter was dated the week before our wedding. It began with, "I know what I did can never be undone." Then, I shouldn't have let him take the blame. I shouldn't have told them it was Rose's fault. There it was. The smoking gun. A story buried beneath another. A betrayal that didn't start with me, but had echoed through Cora's life like a curse she couldn't stop passing forward. I stared at that letter, numb again. Cora had lied to me. But she had also lied to her own family. She had destroyed others long before me. I was just her latest casualty. And I realized something then, sitting on the cold floor of Letitia's office with those letters fanned out before me. This wasn't just a story about betrayal. It was a story about a woman who had never once told the truth, not to her husbands, not to her family, and maybe not even to herself. And I was going to make sure that story, the full story, finally saw the light of day. I didn't drive home that night. After reading through every one of those letters in Letitia's office, I couldn't bring myself to face another wall that had once held her voice. I couldn't sit in a chair where I used to imagine our future. So I booked a motel an hour out of town, one of those places that hasn't changed the curtains since the early 90s, where the air conditioner buzzes like it's got a grudge. I laid on top of the sheets, clothes still on, the lockbox open on the nightstand like a wound that wouldn't close. And I read the letter again, the one to Rose. Each word was a punch I never saw coming. Cora wrote about a fight, about something that went too far, about how their parents believed it was Rose's fault and how she didn't correct them. She kept repeating that phrase, "I didn't correct them," over and over again, like a confession she couldn't stop whispering to herself. In between the lines, I saw it clearly. Cora had betrayed not just me, not just Alan, but her own sister. From what I could gather, Rose had taken the fall for something big. And Cora had let it happen, or worse, orchestrated it. I didn't know what the original sin was, but I knew what it meant. Lying wasn't something that happened to her. It was something she did, habitually, masterfully, destructively. I stayed up all night researching, and what I found made the blood drain from my face. There were old court records, not under Cora's name, but under Rose's. A sealed juvenile case. Charges dropped due to insufficient evidence, but the accusations were ugly. Something about property destruction, harassment, possible fraud involving a scholarship application. The documents were vague, but the implication was clear. Someone had sabotaged something major. That someone, as I pieced together from Cora's letter, wasn't Rose. It was Cora. She had ruined her sister's future, and then walked down the aisle with me while her hands were still metaphorically bloody. The past wasn't just messy. It was rotting. And I'd been sleeping beside it for almost a decade. At 4:07 a.m., I sat up and did something I thought I'd never do. I called Rose. Her number was scribbled in one of the older letters. I expected it to be disconnected. I expected it to lead to a dead end. But to my shock, she answered on the second ring. Her voice was cautious. Tired. Who is this? My name is Daryl, I said slowly. I was married to Cora. Silence. Then, what do you want? I just found the letters. The ones she wrote you. From years ago. I didn't know you existed until yesterday. Another pause. Then, a long sigh. So she kept them. Everyone, I said. I think she kept them as guilt. Or maybe as leverage. I don't know. There was something in Rose's voice when she replied. Not surprise. Not anger. Just exhaustion. She ruins people, she said flatly. That's what she does. She pretends she's the one who's been wronged. And she wraps herself in it until you can't even tell what's true anymore. She's done it since we were kids. I asked her if she would meet me. She hesitated, then said yes. We met later that afternoon in a coffee shop 2 towns over. Rose looked like an older version of Cora, but without the sharpness. Her smile didn't seem rehearsed. She wore a jacket with torn sleeves and held herself like someone who'd been on the receiving end of too many hard truths. She didn't ask to see the letters. She just asked me one question. How bad did she hurt you? I didn't answer with words. I just slid the photo of the baby across the table. Her lips parted slightly, then pressed into a thin line. She's done it again, she whispered. Different man. Same story. And then she told me something that shattered what little remained of the ground beneath me. Alan wasn't her first. She's done this before. To someone else. With someone else. I blinked. Who? His name was Noah, she said. He was engaged to me. My throat dried. She slept with him 3 months before our wedding. Said it was a mistake. But it wasn't. It was a pattern. One she's never stopped repeating. The truth hit me like a freight train. Cora hadn't just betrayed me. She had been following a blueprint, a path she had walked long before I ever met her. I was just the next name on a list she never bothered to shred. I sat there, staring at my coffee, the room spinning around me. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Finally, Rose asked, What are you going to do now? And I knew the answer. I'm going to end it, I said. And what? All of it. The lies. The silence. I'm not going to let her rewrite this anymore. That evening, I called Letitia and gave her my final instructions. Not just about the legal closure. I wanted everything prepared. Full divorce proceedings, public filing. But more than that, I wanted to submit a formal affidavit of emotional coercion and misrepresentation, not to punish her financially, but to ensure that her version of this story couldn't be used to manipulate another judge, another lawyer, another future. The next morning, I dropped off the original letters, all of them, in a sealed package at a notary, with instructions to forward them to Rose's attorney. I included a note that read, They were always yours. I just happened to stumble across the truth first. And for the first time in years, I felt like I had finally done something right. But just when I thought the damage had been contained, when I finally believed that the worst was behind me, I got the call that changed everything. It was from Cora's employer. And they weren't calling about her. They were calling about me. The call from Cora's employer came early in the morning, before I'd even had a chance to pour coffee. I remember standing in the kitchen of the cabin, barefoot, staring out at the pine trees shrouded in fog, when my phone lit up with a number I didn't recognize. I answered, half expecting another surprise, another lie surfacing from the depths she dragged me into. But this time, it was different. A man introduced himself as the senior VP of Human Resources at the firm where Cora used to work. His voice was calm, direct, and unexpectedly kind. Mr. Everett, he began, I wanted to inform you personally that we've completed our internal review. Ms. Cora Reynolds is no longer employed here. I didn't respond right away. I wasn't sure what he expected me to say. We also received multiple anonymous tips, he continued, some of which included information about a long pattern of professional manipulation, unethical behavior, and forged documentation linked to internal promotions. One of those promotions was yours. My heart stopped. Mine. I asked. Yes, he said. We learned you were nominated for a collaborative consulting project last year. Cora blocked it internally. Told our board you were unfit to represent the company publicly due to emotional instability. Her wording, not ours. I closed my eyes. I remembered that moment clearly now, the rejection I'd chalked up to corporate politics. I remembered how disappointed I felt and how she'd comforted me that night, whispering that they didn't deserve me. It wasn't corporate politics. It was her. I'm sorry you were treated that way, he said. You should have had that opportunity. I took a slow breath. It's not your fault. Before hanging up, he added, we're moving forward with an invitation-only roundtable event next month, focused on professional resilience and integrity. I'd like you to be one of the speakers. I was stunned. You want me to speak? Your story, he said, has reached more people than you think. It matters. After the call ended, I sat there in silence for a long time. This wasn't revenge. It wasn't triumph. It was renewal. An unexpected crack of sunlight after a long, dark season. And for once, I didn't feel like a broken man telling a sad story. I felt like a survivor. Weeks passed. The divorce finalized. Letitia handled it smoothly, professionally, and quietly. I didn't drag Cora through the mud. I didn't need to. Her lies had finally caught up to her, not with fire and fury, but with silence and consequences. She tried to contact me once more, through a handwritten letter. I didn't read it. I returned it unopened. I moved out of the cabin and into a small home in a quiet neighborhood on the edge of town. Nothing fancy, just enough room for me, my sketchbooks, and the golden retriever I adopted named Murphy. He was a rescue. So was I, in a way. I reconnected with Rose. Not romantically. Just two people who shared the same wound and chose not to let it define them. She came to one of my talks. Afterward, we sat at a cafe and laughed about how absurd life could be, how sometimes the people meant to love us the most are the ones who teach us how to walk away. The roundtable event came and went, and I stood in front of a room filled with strangers and told my story, not with bitterness, but with clarity. I told them about the power of staying soft when the world hardens you, about rebuilding your life not with rage, but with truth, about how sometimes losing the person you thought you'd grow old with is exactly what saves you from a lifetime of growing smaller. I still carry the scars, but they don't bleed anymore. And in the quiet of my new home, with Murphy curled up by the fireplace and the weight finally lifted, I've come to understand something that took me nearly 40 years to grasp. Love is not about sacrifice without limits. It's about seeing clearly, choosing yourself, and walking away, not in anger, but in peace, when someone shows you who they truly are. I walked through fire, and somehow, on the other side, I found myself.